if you're ready, Alexander.
Yep, I am. So let's start, I guess. So welcome everyone. Happy to be here and happy to present at Power Pages Bootcamp and talk about code components in Power Pages. So before we begin, let me briefly introduce myself. Although after the pressure and introduction from Raz and others, I don't think that it's needed. But again, my name is Alexander Alashin, and I'm senior developer at Hitachi Solutions Canada. I'm Microsoft-based apps MVP that's specialized in Power Pages and custom code development, PCF, and other stuff. I'm also writing a blog called dancingwithcrm.com when I'm writing about Power Platform, Dynamics, Azure, and stuff like that. And you can always connect with me in various social media by my alias, Dancing with CRM, primarily in LinkedIn or Twitter. And also, if you want to find some code samples, my custom code components, etc., you can always visit my GitHub page at Olashin at GitHub. Also, you can scan this QR code to go to my website if you want. Now, without further ado, let's get started. So what we will talk about on this session? Well, obviously, we'll talk about code components, how we will use them in Power Pages, and we will mostly spend our time in demo, adding various code components, see how they render, etc. Disclaimer, I assume that you know what code components generally is and how to build them, and I will not get deep in how you can build them using React or other ways. And I will talk about some specific things that you can or cannot use, but I think it will be also useful for you in general to how to add code components and see what they can do. So let's get started. What is Power Apps code component and Power Apps component framework? Well, to generalize, it's from, as Microsoft says, one unified framework across model-driven and Canvas, and now Portal, which enables first and third-party developers to build responsive and reusable component using their choice of libraries and services. So this is really important because, as you know, Power Apps community component is a huge thing. Thousands of components are created. They're everywhere. They're enhancing what you can do inside the model-driven Canvas apps, etc. And it's really awesome. You can also use your library of choice, so you're not bound to one specific thing, which also makes it easier and more versatile to create things. Huge shout out to PCF Gallery by Guido, who's also Microsoft MVP. This is your one-stop place to find all PCF components you need. It's constantly updated, and it has tags if this control is supported in Power Pages as well, which is really important. Small disclaimer, even though component might set it's supported on Power Pages, you still need to double check because some components were built in idea for model-driven apps and can be used by Portal or Pages, but they still have some troubles, including some of my components, which we will get in more details later. So before you are using code components, there are basically three main prerequisites. First of all, you need to be system administrator to enable Power Apps component feature in the environment. You can do this in Admin Center. If you don't enable this, you can use code component not just for Power Pages, but for your environment in general. Now, your portal version must be higher than 9.3.3. Most of the users of the Power Pages have automatic updates and should be on this version or higher. But again, I saw example of older portals or other environments where this is not the case. So be aware to check your portal version. Also, your starter portal package also must be greater than 9.2, which again, it is higher in most instances, but it's always good to double check before thinking that something isn't working. Now, if you got all of these checkboxes, let's see how you can add code component to Power Page. Now, if you added a code component to your regular model-driven page, you know that you need to have existing component and add it to the system by importing the solution that has that code component. Then you need to go to form and add that component to the field. And again, we will do this all in demo. This is just step-by-step generalization right now. And usually you stop on the second stage when you're dealing with model-driven app. But for Portal, you have one extra step, and that's you need to configure metadata to render the control. That's because Portal doesn't know that you have custom controls in field, and you need specifically to tell it to render it as a code component. It's fairly easy, and we will see how to do it. So it's just a bit of an extra step, but I saw a lot of people when they're trying to use code components and they used to use them inside model-driven apps, forgot about this step. The other superpower of Power Pages is that you are not limited just to a form. Like, because you can use Liquid in Power Pages, you can also have a standalone component not bound to a form or any other media, and you can just add them by this Liquid code component tag. This is really important and really powerful because it's allowed you to create truly customizable experience and use control libraries for that. So a simple example of a good usage of the code component might be, I don't know, custom map control. Like you would like to use a map and you would like to embed it not on the form, but for example, near the view. And you can create components that can do that. And there are multiple ways how you can do this. So I'm really happy with this one because this is one of the things that we are right now lacking in the model-driven space, that you cannot have unbound component, meaning that they always need to be part of the form. They always need to be on top of something. And this is really cool and really powerful feature that we will get in more details later. Now, of course, not everything is unicorn and rainbows. There are limitations. So first and foremost, dataset components aren't supported. So you cannot place your component on top of the view or a subgrid on a portal. Support for this feature is coming in the future, but unfortunately there is no like hard line or hard date or anything like that. So we just need to wait for this. Virtual components aren't supported. So if you build a PCF component, you know that a couple of months ago, there was a huge announcement that now we can build virtual component. What is a virtual component? Well, virtual component is a component that will be used native libraries provided with model-driven apps like React, React DOM, Fluent UI for styling, etc. And it makes them components itself smaller, faster, and more optimized. It's a huge deal, and I updated a couple of my components to be virtual, which is awesome. But for portals, they are not supported. And again, we will try to add virtual components to see what exactly is wrong and why they're not supported. So we will see that later. Also, if you're building a component that uses device and utility APIs, it will also not be supported on the portal. So if you have it in your control manifest, unfortunately, you cannot use code component in the portal. Same thing with uses feature. If you define a user feature tag in your manifest XML file, you cannot use that component in the portal. And also not field types are supported for the portal. Currently, value elements aren't supported, meaning that you cannot put code component for a lookup or a duration or a time zone or a status, etc., which is a bit limiting. Hopefully, they will be available in the future. And I understand that it's more complicated than just in the Dataverse to do so. So, looking forward to add this edit with a great pleasure. Okay, I know that it was fast and it was just a bit all over the place, but I hope demo will clear things up where I will slow down and we'll have like step-by-step instruction what we can do. So let's move to the demo and let's open my demo Power Page and let's add some component. And again, you can follow me right now and open your Power Page or Power Apps portals. Although if you have Power Page, add code components. But again, nothing stopping you from doing it with your standard portal, just not in Portal Studio. So let's go step by step. So we have my sample portal, which is again your regular starter portal template with some tweaks here and there, but in general, just regular portal. And we have a contact us page. Now, the Contact Us page hosts our feedback form, which is sample forms that user can populate. So let's say we want to add some new fields with code components to this form. How can I do that? Well, if you are lucky and using Power Pages, you can just go and click on the form and click Edit Fields, which will bring you directly to the form editor that you are familiar for Maker Portal. Now, if you're in all Power Apps portal and you cannot do this from Portal Studio, you would need to go to your Maker portal and then go to your solutions and then find your form and modify it through just regular standard editor. So again, as you can see, they're almost the same. And from functionality perspective, you can do it in both instances. I just allows it with Power Pages. We don't need to go to the solution to be able to do this kind of stuff, which is really powerful. So, okay, let's say we want to add some new field. So we have here add field, and let's search for some field. Now you can add any field you want, but if you have some Boolean field, I would ask you to add them because we'll be using Boolean for this demo. If you don't have, you can just create new table column just from here. So for this presentation, I created 3 test fields. So let's add all 3. So we have 3 test fields. So let's say we want to add a custom control on the first one. How we can do that? Well, you can select a field, then go here and open its properties, go to components and click add component. Now in here in the list, you can see all of the code components that are available for this 2 option type field for me in this environment. Now, if you have some code component and you don't see it in this list, well, what you need to do is on top, you can see there is add component button. When you click on it, you will have the component list, and at the bottom, you have get more components option. When you click on that, you will see the list of all components available in your environment. So you can just select those and then click add, and they will be added to this editor. So then you can just return here, click on the components and see your component. That's exactly how I added my custom components here. Okay, so let's say the first code component that you want to have would be just a standard system toggle. This component that you have in your system, it's out of the box, and luckily it works on the portal. So let's add the toggle. And we need to make sure that web is checked, because if you are just showing it from mobile and tablet, yeah, it will work in model-driven app, but it will not work inside Power Pages. So make sure that web is checked. Okay, now we added a toggle control. Okay, nice. Let's say on the second test field, we want to add some other control. So for my demo, I will be using my more toggles control, which is supported from the portal and works, but has a caveat, which I will show you later, which again show a bit of a difference between how components work in portal and in model-driven app and what you need to know. So let's add my component. And as you can see, it has quite a lot of properties that you can have, and we will just keep them empty for now because it will work by default. And we can make sure that web is checked and click done. And this one we will just leave as it is because we want to see how the portal just renders to option control for reference. Now you may notice that we have error loading control right now on the screen, and that's okay. You might see it when you add custom components. Not all of them will show in the editor. So that's completely fine. That doesn't mean that it's broken. It would mean that it's broken if you open a portal or a model-driven app and you will see this text, but in the editor, it's completely fine. Okay, now let's save our form. And publish. Okay, so while our form is publishing, we need to remember the last step. So it's not enough to just put our code components on the form. We need to make sure that portal knows what it needs to render. So to do so, we would need to go to portal management, In the future, this might be added inside the Power Pages, so you don't need to go and switch experience. But for now, the only way is to go to to Portal Management. So we are going to Basic Form, and let's find our Simple Contact Us form. And let's add some basic form metadata. So we need to select attribute. We need to find our attribute on the list. So in this case, it's testbool1. And here you have a control style section. And in control style option set, you need to select code component, which will tell the portal to render this particular component as a code component based on whatever metadata you have in Dynamics. So save and close. Let's create one more because we have two code components fields. Again, attribute, this time testbool2. Oh. Code components, click save. Okay, now we told our portal that we need to show those two as code components, so let's actually see it. Let's go back to our pages. Let's open Contact Us. And as you can see in the preview, it's not showing, but that's fine. And you hit preview, you hit desktop. And voila, as you can see, two code components were added to the page. Nice, right? So they are working, everything looks good. So again, if you will not add basic for metadata, you will not see your code component. And the same thing applies to advanced form. If you're doing, you want to add code components to your advanced form, you also need to create advanced form metadata. Same process. Okay, now let's dive a bit deeper on how components are rendered and how we are actually interacting with them to understand some difference between the standard controls and custom code component. So let's start with the standard field. And let's make it a bit bigger so everyone can see. Okay, so here we have our row with our standard component. And as usual, when you have control on the form, on the portal, it will render as two divs, info and control, when info having additional information and labels, and control that will host your actual control. In this case, our two option is rendered as radio. So we have two radio inputs with two IDs. Now let's see what we have in custom code. So let's start with my custom code component. So if we go, we can see here again, info and control, so far as we have usually. And if we expand control, we can see that here we have two things. We have our actual control, which is encapsulated in this div with all of the inputs, etc. And then we have a hidden input to host our actual value. And this is done because in model-driven apps and in Canvas, when you put your controls, you always have a field. You are using the platform API to interact with the data. So you don't expect to create an actual input or anything like that to store the data. But on the portals, it's different. We get used to use JavaScript or jQuery to get values from the field. We still need to have that field present on the form because we are usually referring to it by ID. And it would be a huge ask to ask community to include some inputs, and it also makes a lot of components unusable on the portal. So this is really clever and really nice solution that makes sure that whatever component you are adding, there will be a hidden input that will hold the actual value that you can interact as usual. So if we are querying the data, we can query that from here, which is really nice. And the same, it's not just for my custom code control. If we inspect the system out of the box one, again, the same thing will be, you have your div with custom control and hidden input with a value. Now, one thing to remember is when you're building your code control, you are updating your value in update to your function, which is triggered whenever system changes value. You might get used that in model-driven app, update to you is triggered really often, like a lot of things are changing and constantly trigger your components, your form. In the portal, that's not generally the case. You almost not get update view unless the value actually change. However, there is things that you need to remember. So let's say I want to use, I have some JavaScript code on the page that, for example, if I select this one, the second one would need to be selected as well. So usually how you would write it is you would write, jQuery, you would take ID of our custom fields, like this, and you would set the value, for example, to true, because right now, as you can see, it's false. Now, if I will just set the value, let's do it actually. You can see that the component didn't change despite the input, as you can see, value set to true. And that's because you need to trigger on change event manually. You need to tell the portal that change happened, please trigger code component will register the change. So if I will add here change to trigger the change event, subsequently triggering update view, as you can see, voila, it changed because value changed and system was notified about it. So this is quite important when you're working with Portal, as I know a lot of people just setting the values, but if you are having code component on top of the value, don't forget to trigger change event. Quick side note, this message has nothing to do with control about jQuery FN change. This is just part of the GQ migrate libraries that installed with the portal. Okay, now when we know that we can place code components, we know how they look, and we know that how we trigger, let's move on to next thing. And now let's view how some APIs that you get used to in the portal, that you get used in model-driven app, might not fully work in the portal. So let's say we want to update this Boolean field from out of the box toggle control to my custom code component. So let's go back to our form. Let's edit fields. Okay, and let's switch this control from toggle. Let's remove it. And let's add my more toggles control. And let's save. Again, as you can see, error loading control, but everything fine on the portal. And let's publish. And let's preview. Okay, didn't clear it yet. Let's clear cache again. Here we go. So now we have multiple the same components on the page, and looks good. However, if you click on the second one, as you notice, second one doesn't change, just the first one changed. So what's going on? Why my controls suddenly stop working when there's two of those? Well, there is a pretty easy explanation. So let's open my code control index.ts and take a look. So the library I'm using to make it stylish and beautiful called more toggle CSS. And one of those things this uses ID and JavaScript to change the classes when you click and change the things. So you need to have a unique ID for the field, for the input. And yeah, I wanted to have the input to have a logical name of the field to make sure that it's unique, but also to have a logical name. And you usually do it with context.parameters, your parameter, which in my case is bound field. Then you go to attributes and you're searching for a logical name. And that's how I was ensuring that it was unique. And if we open, for example, let's open in model-driven apps to show that it works. So in here, as you can see, it works. There is no interference. Everything works just as intended. How so? Well, if we inspect the control, we can see that ID of the hidden input that I'm using is the logical name of the field, which is fine in model-driven apps, but there is a bug currently that in Portal, instead of the logical name of the field, you will have a name of the parameter. So manifest to check it again. It's called bound field. And yeah, instead of returning logical name of this field, it just returns the name of the parameter. So this is a bug and this might be fixed, but this just shows that some of the API of the things that you used to in model-driven apps might not work in Power Pages. Big shout out to Power Pages team for ironing out a lot of things and making sure that it works, but there are still some quirks here and there. So if when you build your component, you experience something like that, feel free to notify them. They're really good and they're trying to do their best because it's a huge and big thing. Now, even if it would work, there is another issue with my approach. Because Portal uses hidden inputs that already has ID of our logical, of our field, this would still be a problem for my library because now there will be, again, two IDs for the same field. A library is smart enough to figuring it out, but in general, that would be a problem. So if you're using a logical name as ID for some internal reason, in the portal, you might have a problem because there would be already an input with that ID placed by the portal itself. So be aware of that and make sure that you are always aware that there is a hidden input. Okay, moving on, let's talk about a bit about the styling. So styling on the portal is really important, right? We want everything look consistent. We want everything look beautiful. Portal using Bootstrap 3, which a bit limiting, but still fair enough option. And if you want to make a component specifically for Portal, the easiest way would be to just use Bootstrap as your styling library. And using Bootstrap as your styling library, what I actually mean by that is you don't need to include Bootstrap with your control because Bootstrap will be provided by the portal. So during the development, it might look odd, but it will pick up the styles from the portal and ensure that it will be consistent across the board. Let's see what I mean by that. So I created a sample component called Bootstrap style, and it's a simple button, again, for toggle that has yes, no feature. So as you can see, it added it as a button. And because control doesn't have styles of its own, it will just render how our button is rendered on the page. So let's save. Let's publish. And let's sync. As you can see, now it's just rendering as a checkbox. Again, the steps that I missed is that we need to add the metadata, because without it, it will not work. So let's return to our form with the metadata, and let's create a new metadata for our third field. Okay, and let's render it as code component, hit save. Okay, now let's clear the cache again. Well, as you can see, it rendered as a button. And as you can see, it works. So let's inspect this control. What actually is it? Well, as you can see, it's like really basic control. It's just a button that has your regular Bootstrap styling button primary. And yeah, if we will change the styling of our portal, so buttons will have different color. Let's do that. Let's go to styling. Let's go to buttons. And let's change. Let's say we want dark buttons. And let's hit save. Okay, and let's preview desktop. Let's clear it again. Voila, as you can see, because we were using just Bootstrap styling and we didn't include our own styles, it works just fine. So it follows the portal theme. So, but what if you don't want to use Bootstrap? What are your options? Well, again, you can do whatever you want. You can use React libraries. You can use whatever styling framework you want, and all of them support different ways of customizing the element by the client. One thing that you always need to remember is, and it's really important, especially in the portal, is your component is loading inside a web page that might already has some other styling that might take a precedent. So you don't want your styling to interfere with whatever portal is doing. And to do so, and also it's highlighted in Microsoft documentation, the easiest way would be to just encapsulate your styling with the name of your control. So if we take a look again of how our component rendered, you may notice that it will be always rendered in a div that has a class that corresponds to our custom control. And it will be the namespace of the control, in this case, dancing with CRM controls, dot, and the name of the control, dot bootstrap style. So in your styling file, you can just add this at the beginning as a precursor to make sure that your style will apply only inside here and will not affect anything outside of your control. If you're using some libraries like styled components, etc., that already creates unique styling for each component, you don't need to care about this. But in general, that's a good rule of thumb to always encapsulate your styling, even not just for Portal, but for model-driven apps as well. Okay, let's move forward to my favorite part, because I really like that code components allow you to have them separately on separate pages. So let's say we want to create a page that want to have some reusable components, for example, some dashboard of sorts or something. So I created a simple dashboard page, which consists of two code components. This is the code components. One of them is weather snippet, and other of them is a sample stock market card, which is really old one. So how can you add the code components to your page? Well, let's inspect the code. So I will go to my demo page. Let's go dashboard. And as you can see right away, you can see that there is a placeholder called, this is a code component placeholder. Now, Power Page will not render your code components in Liquid. I don't know if this will come in the future or not. There's nothing about it, but I would say it's still a good from at least perspective, or you understand where your component placed. Also, you cannot tell what the actual page will look like unless you visited the page. So if you want to explore this, let's see. So we have our page code editor, and we have our code component liquid tag. So code component liquid tag consists of one required property and multiple non-required, sort of. Let me explain. So first and foremost, the main properties that you need to provide is the name of your custom control. And that's not the names that you can see inside of the editor. As you remember previously, when we clicked on editor and added code component in model-driven app, we see like beautiful name, but not this weird name. So this is called full name or just a name of control, and it consists of three main parts. It consists of publisher prefix, it consists of the namespace, and it consists of the name of the control. But you may notice that on the screen, the second control doesn't have publisher prefix. How so? Well, again, this comes to when control was created. So this, for example, stock market card was one of the first controls that I created when Power Apps component framework was still in preview a long time ago, and I'm surprised that it still works. And as you can see, notion of how components were named then and generated by the system was different. So you would need to find out the full name of your control. How can you do that? Well, there are multiple things how you can do that. So first, you can go to your solution. So let's go back to our solutions. I have one open here. And let's say you have, in my test case, I have this solution which has all of my custom controls. And you can see that there is a name that you can find that has basically a full name of our component. So you can just come here and check it. But what if you're not importing it from a solution? Or what if it's old code component? Or if you want to use some system one, but you want to use them on a separate page, what you want to do, how you can find it? Well, in Microsoft documentation, there is a way, and you would need to use a web API from your instance. So yeah, it will not look pretty, but it is what it is. So actually, do I have? Let's simplify it, make it a bit more beautiful. Yeah. So and this URL I will share in chat. Also keep in mind it's shared on Microsoft portal, so in documentation. So URL. Okay, and this will bring you the list of all custom controls that you have in your system. And especially this select just filters, so we don't have unnecessary data and just see the name of our controls. And we can search, for example, I want to find my more toggles, right? So I'm searching for more toggles, and I can see that its full name is DVCRM _ dancing with CRM controls, more toggle control. Okay, nice. But just knowing the name is not enough. You also need to know parameters, what you need to pass to understand, to make sure that your component work. And again, if we are going back to our editor, let's go back actually and do that. And if we are wanting to see parameters in here, yeah. So when you add parameters in here, you can see them in beautiful way, main field, toggle class, toggle size, etc. But it doesn't say what is actual name inside of the manifest. So like if I want to add more toggles as a standalone, I need to populate at least this field. But parameter doesn't call main field. As you might recall, it called bound field. So how do I identify this? Well, again, in the same not really beautiful fashion, you would need to perform web API query, and you would need to filter So now when you know the name of your control, you can filter to only show you your control. And then you want to see manifest. And manifest basically, again, this is exactly what it is. It's your XML manifest from the file, which has all the properties. So, right, we know that we need to know main field, right? So we have main field, and we can see that it's a bound field, and its actual name is a bound field for this display name. So we need in code component to add bound field. Also, you would need to see if it's required or not. So for example, this property is required, all others are not, so we can just skip them. I know it's not really friendly experience, but again, you need to remember that code components right now are in preview. So this will likely change. We will likely be able to see the properties in other way. But for now, this is, unfriendly way to do so. So keep that in mind. Again, I will share this URL with you, and you can also find it in the documentation. And yeah, let's share it. Okay. Okay, so now we know what we need to add, and let's pretend that we added this control. Let's start with the stock card, for example. Oh no, actually, let's do full example. Let's go, and I have a page called code components, which doesn't have any code component in it. So let's change our code. And my pop pages is down, sorry, happens from time to time. Let me refresh. Okay, so let's add our code component. So you need to say code component. Then you need to provide the name. Now, you need to be careful because I saw this previously. The name is not a string field. You're just providing it as a name. You don't need to double quotes or anything like that. It is just a name. So as you can see, I'm not adding any quotes or anything like that. Okay, and now we want to add our property, which is bound field. And this bound field is our two option field, so it expects a value. So in this case, it would be true or false. So let's say true. Okay, nice. We have a bunch of optional parameters, but we don't care about those. So let's click save. And as you can see, we have this as a code component placeholder. Now let's hit preview and let's see. Does it actually work? Yay, we have my code component. As you can see, clickable, works as a separate thing. Everything's great, right? Well, one last thing that you need to know is, remember how I told you that Power Pages also renders hidden input on the form to ensure that your JavaScript will work? Yeah, so that thing only works on the form. If you're rendering your code component as a standalone thing on a page, there will be no hidden inputs, nothing like that. It will just, as you can see, it just rendering my control. So you can see this span ID with the control. Again, it's even span, not the div as we have previously, and no hidden input. So how do you actually get the data from any input type field? Well, you cannot. Basically, right now, code components in general, especially on a liquid, is more for presentation purpose. So like you create something to show the data in a standalone fashion. And right now, if you want to use your code component as a standalone and like have a custom form that will reuse your code components, you would need to make sure that you have your hidden input of any sort that would be populated with the actual values that you are storing, so that it can be consumed on the standalone page. And make sure that you will also think about when your code component is used on form and there is actual hidden input. So, right now you cannot tell, is it code component on a standalone page or code component in form? There is no parameter in the mode, anything like that. So you would need to, I don't know, create optional parameter. This might change. Code components right now in the preview, they're still ironing out a lot of things. It might look completely different down the road. And I hope Microsoft will address this difference between standalone and form PCF, or more explicitly say what's the perfect usage from one versus other. But yeah, that's it for me. Now I reserve, it's 45, so we have 15 minutes for some Q&A. I hope you have some questions. So let's see. Yeah, Gary, regarding PCF components for readable grid, as I told previously, subgrids and or dataset type components are not supported for the portal, so you cannot get those. There are a couple of really interesting PCF components to work with subgrids, and you can find them in PCF Gallery, pcf.gallery website. But again, they will not work on the portal. As a workaround for now, people might create code components that are sitting on single line text, are getting value via web API and renders them as a grid. But again, it's a limitation. Hopefully, dataset will be available soon. But again, no timeline for now. Any other questions?
There is no questions, Alexander. I think thanks for the wonderful presentation.
Nice. Hope you find it useful.
Yeah.
As always, a great presentation. Thank you, Alexander. Really enjoyed that. I think my mind is actually blown with some of the things that you've shown us today. So I definitely need to go away and get some hands-on experience with a lot of this stuff, if I'm honest. But yeah, that was a really, really cool session. Thank you very much for coming along. I think we actually have you doing another session as well, don't we?
Yep, we have another session with me.
Cool.
Later today.
Okay. Pardon?
Yeah, it's later today.
Yeah. So. What is that one on?
It would be after the next speaker. I will be talking about CLI in Power Pages.
Fantastic. I think that's something that everyone is really keen to know more about. We had quite a lot of questions yesterday actually about it. So hopefully some of those attendees have come along again today and will be able to learn quite a lot from you during that session. So I think there'll be quite a lot of us looking forward to that one as well. I think it's been quite a tremendous day of learning today, pretty much the same as it was yesterday. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. We've been so lucky with all of the speakers that have come along.
Okay, yeah, I can see one more from Gary. What are some of the most valuable PCF components for Power Pages? Well, honestly, it's hard to tell right now because a lot of really great components are tailored specifically for model-driven app and model-driven scenarios. I would say the main benefits for PCF components would be for the people that create their libraries and set up the components to reuse across the board. So that would be awesome to make consistent Power Pages, and instead of milling with Bootstrap styles, etc., just create something that's embedded in your PCF components. But from existing one, I would say toggles, just out of the box toggles that you have with Dynamics, because frankly, a lot of users, customers, and me included, doesn't like the standard radio button that you have with a checkbox. So just replace it with toggle control, make a big difference.
Okay, fabulous. Well, thank you very much, Alexander, for that fantastic session. Hopefully now you've got a chance to have a cup of coffee or a short walk or something to prepare your mind for your next session. I think we have coming up soon. Actually, we've got I think we've got Arpit doing another. We've got Arpit doing another session, haven't we, Arpit?
Yeah, Cyril. It's on Portal ALM.
Fantastic. Again, this is again something else that people were asking lots of questions about yesterday. So a topic which is very, very popular and in the front of a lot of people's minds. So yeah, that's another one that we're going to be looking forward to, I'm sure.
Yep. So
I've thoroughly enjoyed a lot of the speakers today, actually. I've thoroughly enjoyed your session earlier, Arpit, on, as I mentioned, on the Azure B2C customization of that page. I've really struggled with that myself recently to get to grips with it. So that's something that's going to be really useful to me moving forward.